All right, teammates, we are back once again. If this is your first time listening to the Move Swiftly podcast, welcome to the show. Welcome to the number one show on innovative teamwork. Great to have you. Looking forward to having you back for more. Again, as usual, shout out to podmatch.com for bringing me such great people to have on the show. To my regular listeners, you already know how I get down. The gems just bring on incredible people. And today I have someone that actually spent a significant time working for Google. And the thing is, I didn't have to research that to know that he has a company now, currently has a company now that he named after his dogs, actually. So I am incredibly excited to get into his story, incredibly excited to kind of pick his brain and allow you guys to meet someone who's a consultant and who can kind of help your business get on the right track. So with all that, Mr. Jason Shafton, welcome to the Move Swiftly podcast. Great to have you.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, so let's dig into this because, as I was getting prepared for this and I was listening to you on previous shows, I couldn't help but think of the movie The Internship. All right, and this is the closest and the only people I actually know that's actually worked for Google. Not only did you work for Google, you dominated the industry, then you were able to branch off and do some other things as well, and then eventually build your own business. So I think the best place to start off is just how does one even go about applying to work for Google, much less, succeeded and being able to, build the things that you built. So with all that, I'll just kind of let you take it away from there.
Yeah. So Google's crazy. My story of how
I
I got a
bet.
job there is funny. Yeah, it's funny, right? Like I applied for a job at Google in 2006. So it's a very different company back then. I think there were like 5,000 employees. I think they got like 250,000 now.
Mhm.
So for me, this looks like a really cool place to work. I was finishing up college, living in Chicago. I grew up outside of Chicago, and I applied for this job at Google called executive assistant to the founders. So Larry and Sergey, they were looking for
Right.
a couple of executive assistants, and I was like, well, that sounds like a crazy and weird and fun job, so I'll apply for it.
Yes.
Didn't hear anything back. A couple months later, I get a phone call, and it's like, hey, we saw you applied for this job. You are not qualified for that at all.
Wow.
You have never been an executive assistant before, so that would not be a good job for you. But we have these other jobs helping with Google AdWords, working with advertisers. We think you'd be great for that. So, we'd like you to interview for that job. I said, sure,
Right.
great. Google, yeah, I'll take the interview. I flew out to California. I
Mhm.
interviewed. There were like these rooms just full of like cubicles where there were just dozens of people interviewing at the same time.
Right.
And I got the job as AdWords coordinator, later called like AdWords associate. Now it's called Google Ads, and
Mhm.
then the rest is history. But it was not because I was like super thoughtful about it. I applied for a job I wasn't qualified for, and I happened to get the call back.
Mhm. So with Google AdWords, because you said this was 2006. If I'm, and you can correct me
Yep.
if I'm wrong, but Google was not necessarily taking over the world yet. I know a lot of because I was in high school, I think back in 2006. I know we would Google stuff, but the whole ad concept between that and Facebook, I think ads, it must have been in its beginning stages. So how has the growth, like what
Yeah.
do you see in regards to the growth of it and as things continue for you, because I believe you were there, what, about, was it 7 years or close to a decade? How did you see things evolve
Yeah.
and eventually get the confidence to build up your own thing to where you say, look, I can start running my own consulting firm?
Yeah. So a lot of things have happened since then. You're right. Google maybe wasn't taking over the world at that point, but it certainly had become a verb already and was like the place to go when you search the internet. I remember, I'm a little bit older than you. I remember when there was Lycos and Alta Vista and Ask Jeeves,
I
and that
did,
was how
yeah,
you
I
looked for
remember
things on the
that.
internet. So when Google came along, I was in high school when Google came along, and this was like late 90s,
Right.
early 2000s, and it was like amazing.
Uh,
Uh, Things have changed a lot. Google AdWords now called Google Ads. Facebook is a part of Meta now. Now they're called
yeah,
Meta. There was no Facebook in 2006. It didn't even exist yet. A lot of the people, my friends and colleagues at Google, went to go work at Facebook, now Meta. And
yeah, that was like
it
MySpace
is
back
the
then,
industry is
actually.
completely
Now I'm thinking
different.
about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
MySpace was the precursor, Friendster.
Mhm.
So the world is completely different, right? we're experiencing the AI revolution right now. So it's like we're several tech cycles ago we're talking about, right? Like
Right,
when
right, right,
search was the big innovation, like actually searching the whole internet. So for
right.
me, it was really a process of learning a lot of stuff at Google, learning about how to mess up and learn from it and get better,
Mm-hmm.
and making lots of mistakes and having tons of smart people around me that made me want to be better and faster and smarter.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the big formative experience post Google that led me to be confident enough to like run my own consulting firm, which I do now, is I co-founded a startup. We raised a bunch of venture capital. It was called Heal. It just got acquired by a big healthcare company called Humana. And then I worked at another startup, and then I worked at Headspace, which probably everybody's heard of, and I helped with growth and marketing there. And after those experiences, I was like, okay, I know what startups need to help grow. I understand tech companies. I've been inside the big one, Google, and now I've helped do it at these little ones.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it was building a network of people that could help me. I'm not a solo consultant. I run a firm. I have a bunch of people that do it with me, and they're all more talented than me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a network of people that were looking for the kind of help that I and that team could provide. And so I just kind of connected those two things.
Yeah, and I was actually, like I said, I was listening to you before we started recording, and one of the things that you did mention is you gave a lot of credit to your network and leaning into your network, and not necessarily being a person that had to go outside of their network to learn certain things, to build certain startups, to be a part of certain companies, or just be a part of certain conversations to build confidence. So the question I actually have for you is, when you confront a lot of these startup companies, what's a common challenge that you're always seeing over and over and over again? Because like when I think about it, I would think sometimes there's a startup that wants to just start to get sold, and they want to maybe do it for the long haul. What's something that you see that's common amongst everyone that kind of comes into your world, and you're like, look, this is common, let's fix it, let's do this, that, and the third.
Yeah. A lot of common issues with early stage startups that I see over and over again are not understanding the user well enough. We had a thing at Google that I think was an Eric Schmidtism, the first like adult CEO of Google.
Mm-hmm.
He would say, or maybe it was Larry and Sergey, but they would say, focus on the user and all else will follow.
Wow.
And a lot of startups get hung up on like building a great solution based on them being a potential user of it, or like coming at the problem of like how can we make money, or how can we make this work as a product, and thinking about it from their perspective and not their customer or user's perspective. So if you get too kind of hung up in navel gazing and looking at yourself and what you're building, and
Mm-hmm.
not thinking about your customer and your user, you're more likely to fail. So I think that's number one, is like know the user and follow them. And then I grew up inside of the product marketing organization in Google and learned an incredible amount there. And one of the things that I learned from that experience was another saying: know the user, know the magic, connect the two. So first you got to figure out your user, your customer, and then the magic is the product, right? What have you created that's better? If you think of like the Steve Jobs, like he used to talk about like jobs to be done. What are we being hired to do as a product? Like, what is your iPhone for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it really for making phone calls? No, not anymore. It does so much stuff for you. So when
Exactly.
you think about the jobs to be done for your product or service, or building a startup, what is the magic about that? What makes you special and different that your user is going to give a shit about, right?
Right.
And
Right.
that's another thing I often see, is that people can't connect those two things.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing that comes up a lot, and because I think about growth and marketing, this is the one that really grinds my gears,
Yes.
is because we're all consumers. Everybody thinks they understand marketing and growth. But the reality is, just because you saw a cool Super Bowl ad, or you saw an ad on Google, or you saw an ad on Facebook or Instagram, doesn't mean you're a marketer or you know anything about marketing. And so
Right.
as somebody who spent a 20 plus year career in growth and marketing, there are people that are really good at it, who are experts, and
Right.
you got to bring in people that are smart, that are expert in that area, to help you figure out your growth strategy once you have a product that's really great.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, and another thing again, I love your point about people think that they know marketing, right? I love your point about people thinking just because they're around it that they think, all right, I'm going to go create this website. I'm going to go create something that I know I like. But I have a coach actually who tells me all the time, you are not your avatar. You are not your customer. You are not your client. That's what you do. When it comes to advising people, though, right? Though the ones that come to you, this is a very difficult thing because they can be very stubborn, and I've experienced it myself, right?
Yep.
They come to an expert like you, they feel like, all right, look, I paid you and I know this stuff. I know when it's explaining to them, hey, I got this, I'm the expert. How do you sort of explain it to them that, hey, just putting up a website and just doing this, just doing that? How does those uncomfortable conversations go? So so you establish yourself as the expert. Because again, one of the things that really kind of struck me when I was listening to you earlier is that you didn't even have a website for the longest time. I hear this guy in tech, and he didn't even have a website, for a period
Yeah.
of time, but he was still developing clients, and he was still, again, just using the good old fashioned network to still be lucrative and things like that. And that's a very valuable piece of advice that you can give listeners right now in terms of, hey, I get there's all these tools and you can be excited. You can go and create stuff on your own, but you got to consult the experts. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a somewhat intractable problem, frankly, because, and I like to say the quiet part out loud, so forgive me if this is too blunt, but your point about stubbornness, I think, doesn't quite go far enough. A lot of people who are founders and CEOs um, only want to hear good things about their business and their product.
yeah.
And as a consultant, they're paying me to tell them the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes, not to quote a famous movie, but they can't handle the truth. And
I
in the
love
end,
that.
they just can't handle me telling them their baby is ugly, or
Yeah.
that nobody will care, and that
Mm-hmm.
they have to do better, they have to invest more. I'm dealing with a client right now where I'm having this issue where I'm having to explain to the founder and CEO, hey,
Mm-hmm.
this isn't good enough to do what you're trying to do, and here's the
Right.
things that you need to do. And what I typically do in this situation is just say, look, like, you're paying me to give you advice. If you don't want to take my advice or don't want to listen to it, then you shouldn't pay me. And that's
Right.
okay. Like,
Right.
maybe it's not a good fit. I
Right.
only want to be useful and helpful to people. I've had to fire many clients as a consultant, and fortunately, I'm not the one typically getting fired. But
Mm-hmm.
I will tell them, like, hey, it's not right, because you don't want to take what I'm and use that from the experience I have and the knowledge I have in the space, and that's okay.
Right. Now, when it comes to and this was something that we mentioned it earlier, because the money when it comes to online and tech stuff, a lot of it is ad revenue. And you mentioned, starting up companies and being able to sell it. And one of the companies that I tried to start myself, it was about selling ad space and trying to figure out how to kind of crack that code. Can you kind of speak a little bit on how to develop a product that's going to get advertisements and how the advertisements works? Because it changes so much. Now ads are
Sure.
maybe video, and now, I mean, I put a ton of YouTube shorts out there. YouTube shorts wasn't even a thing. Now when it comes
Right.
to trying to nail down maybe a pitch in terms of how to get your I don't want to call them sponsors, I want to call them internet advertising. Where do
Sure.
you kind of point people to when it comes to that?
Yeah. Advertising has changed a tremendous amount. Even since I started working at Google, to your point, there's so many more ad formats and ways to connect with people. So, when we think about this podcast that we're on right now, that you host, you can advertise on a podcast, and there's platforms and agencies and kind of tech solutions, as well as, direct buys where you can just buy an ad to be on a podcast, be a sponsor, and you would read, a script, or you play an ad on behalf of that sponsor.
Right.
I think the way to think about the kind of proliferation of different ad formats and different ways to reach people just comes back to the first thing I said about startups. Like,
Mm-hmm.
know your audience, know your user. Who are you trying to reach?
Okay.
Whatever your product or service is, and if you're a media product, in your case, like if you're making content and you want to get sponsors and
Mm-hmm.
ads on that content, or if you're selling something that you
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to monetize using advertising, think about who's your target audience and how would you reach them. And now you've got a double-sided marketplace, because you're selling ad space, and you're also trying to use those ads to reach an audience. So you have to build an audience so that you have somebody that your ads are then valuable because they're getting in front of, and then you also have to sell those ads. There's too many platforms to count right here, but from my perspective, as somebody who's worked in kind of media and performance marketing for years, the clear winners that capture a huge amount of the share in terms of ad dollars today are Google and Meta. because 80% of internet users, or more than that even,
Hmm.
are going through those big gateways to the web today, whether
Right.
it's on their phone or on a computer. They're going to see Google ads when they search. They're going to see Meta ads when they're scrolling Instagram,
Hmm.
and that's a good way to reach people at scale. But there's niches. Everything has a niche. You could find a subreddit for exactly the specific topic that you care about. You know, you're really into vintage cars. There's a vintage car subreddit, and you can decide you want to target people that are on there all the time.
Hmm.
There's an audience for everything now, and there's somebody willing to sell you an ad to
Yeah.
get in front of that audience.
Okay, so with that being said, I definitely want to get into your current company, Winston and Winston Francis, and no, it's Francois, excuse me, Winston and Francois,
All
who
good.
you
Yeah.
you named it after your dogs, which again I think is incredibly creative because, like you said, it always puts a smile on people's face when they ask you and stuff like that. Kind of walk us through how you were able to take that knowledge, that everything that all the stuff that you were doing previously, build your own brand, and then where do you see it going in the future, or how do you serve people, and who? I know it's a loaded question, but who exactly are you filtering out of your world and kind of filtering in, because you had already just mentioned that there's some clients that you've had to fire. So I want to make sure we put it
Yeah.
out there now. Look, these are the people I want I want in my world, but these are the people I don't want in my world. So the floor is
Sure.
yours.
Yeah, look, like, appreciate the platform for self-promotion. I
Yeah.
honestly like to help people, right? So I don't want to close off somebody who maybe could use help but isn't quite ready to pay a consulting firm retainer or do a big
Right.
project with us. And you know, I want to be helpful. If you find me on social platforms and you want to at me, I'm down to respond
Yeah.
and be helpful. Our website is wf.team/podcast. That's how you can find us.
Hmm.
That's like the letter W, letter F dot TEAM/podcast, and that'll get you
We'll put all that in
to
the show
more
notes.
info and a way to get in touch. Yeah, so that's a way to like reach out if we can be helpful. And then, to answer your question about who we work with, we're small. We have a small team and we only work with, maybe 5 to 10 clients at a time. We just don't have enough
Mm-hmm.
resources to do more than that. And as a result, that means companies that are mid to late stage, typically technology startups.
Hmm.
They're doing millions of dollars in revenue a year and they have a specific growth or marketing problem they need help with. And we come in and we help solve that problem. And then, our best feature and the best selling point of the way that we work is we actually work ourselves out of a job. So we help solve growth problems and then we build the team internally with the client so that they can replace us with their own talent inside the team or maybe a lower
Uh,
cost resource that's outside the team. But
right.
we're a different we're kind of different. We're not like an ad agency and we're not quite like a big consulting firm. We're somewhere in between. We're an embedded part of the team and we work with companies that need help solving very specific hard problems that we've tackled many times before.
Right. And where do you see it going in the future? Like, what do you see is next? Is it going to be go become just a full on agency, or is it going to become kind of stay where you're at now? Just kind of put out the vision now.
Yeah. Testing right now is making it easier to get access to our team on a hourly basis. So you think of somebody who might not be ready for that bigger engagement, you know, having a site where you can book one-on-one sessions with a consultant who's an expert in the specific thing you need help with. It's email
Hmm.
marketing, or like you said, like I need help with Google ads or Meta
Right.
ads or whatever.
Hmm.
So having those people be bookable by the hour is something we're experimenting with. And that opens up a whole new kind of long tail of potential smaller customers.
Right.
And then I'm super interested in content, right? You've got your podcast. I have one as well. It's
Hmm.
called Frank Growth. I mentioned to you earlier, I like to say the quiet part out loud. Frank Growth is all about understanding and exploring the challenges of growing a business and being a part of a partnership like a marriage or having a significant other and kids and family and like trying to do both, like trying to be a good entrepreneur and a good part of a family. We're
Hmm.
interviewing couples, whether it's the husband or the wife, or one of the partners is the entrepreneur, the other one stays home, or they're both entrepreneurs or they both work, but one of them is starting a company and they have, kids or no kids or a dog. We're getting these really interesting stories. And so I believe there's an opportunity to tell stories with content about the challenges of doing what a lot of these folks out there are trying to do. Nobody talks about that stuff. Everybody talks about oh, building a business is cool and sexy, and here's all the grinding and hustling I'm doing, but like there's that invisible support system behind to the surface. So we've got this,
Need. It is a
one-on-one
need.
booking
It is a
thing you can
huge need.
do. Yeah, and we've got this content angle where we're telling these interesting stories, and then we have this business where we help clients. I don't want to be an agency. I think that's kind of like a curse word at this point. Like
Uh,
I've been on the client side and I've hired a bunch of
yeah,
shitty agencies that
yeah,
I feel like are just in it for the, long-term contract and agency fees. I never want someone to look at us that way. I
yeah.
want us to be thought of as like a really valuable part of the team. And so that's
Yeah.
how I try to approach our clients.
Man, yeah, that's a very interesting make. I'll definitely put clips on that in the show notes as well. But yeah, a lot of people don't think about that. They hear the word entrepreneur, they hear the word running your own business, having your own hours, but the support system and the significant other is that's as far as you're gonna go. You gotta find the right specific person. You cannot be here with
Right.
bullshitters that are just gonna hold you back because number one, when they see your grind, if they're not the right person, they're going to be very threatened. They're going to be the people that hold you back. And it's going to be a very challenging thing for you to pick your entrepreneurial venture with someone that's like a fucking anchor. All right. You don't want
Yep.
that in your life. Trust me when I tell you, you don't want
100%.
that. We could stay on here for another hour just talking about that subject alone, but I do want to be
Yep.
very respectful of your time. Thank you for dealing with the tech issues today. It's ironic that
Of course.
we before we got on that, I had you come on and teach me how to do a speed test on my computer and stuff like that. So I was learning I'm learning with you guys as listeners. I was learning before we actually started recording and all that. So appreciate that very much. With all that, one of the things I do to close out all the shows, Jason, is I want you to use your imagination a little bit. Pretend that you are back in college. You just applied to Google. Somebody just told you you're not good enough to get the job. So now you don't even know if you want the Google job or you're just kind of confused. Pretend that young man has come into the Zoom room and give him some words of encouragement and we'll officially close.
Yeah. If you are trying to find your way and you getting turned down for a job, having a hard time finding the right opportunity or getting some hard feedback, use it as fuel. Try to really hear it. Ask for more. Say, can I please have another?
Yeah.
What can I do better? Take all of that input and give it to yourself in a kind but thoughtful and critical, self-aware way to say, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to grow and get better. I could have had Google tell me, yeah, you're not right for the executive assistant position to the founders. And, here's this other job. And I could have been like, well, screw you, Google. I don't want that other job. I want the job I applied for. No, it
Mm-hmm.
was Google. I was going to take that call. If
Yeah.
you get feedback, hey, you're not right for this role, but we'll keep your resume on file. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. If you could give me any other feedback of how I could be right for that role or how I can improve, I would appreciate that. I think that's the way I would approach it. And that shows a growth mindset. And you never know, that recruiter, that company might come back in a month or with that next email and say, you know what? Actually, we love that you responded that way, and let's keep the conversation going.
Amen, man. I love that. And I'm praying for you listeners to have taken that because nowadays, again, with the internet, with the fact that all you really need if you focus enough to make money is this laptop or is your technological device or whatever it is you have as technology, you don't necessarily even need to meet people in person anymore to have a job. So it's going to be that much more important that you take feedback when you can, apply that feedback so you continuously get better and get better and get better. And you use the term that I say very frequently on the show with this having the growth mindset, not the fixed one, but the growth mindset is so very important. So with all that, fellow teammates, continue to move swiftly. We will talk more soon.